Hello, Hoyas, and welcome to this Georgetown McDonough School Business session on best practices for virtual interviewing. I'm Eric Young in Washington, D.C., and I'm an assistant dean in the Georgetown MBA Career Center. And I'm honored to host this conversation today with Becca Ballier. Becca's in Seattle and really a perfect guest to speak with us as she has experience as an academic and corporate recruiter. Becca, welcome. We'd love to have you have us get to know you a little bit and hear about your background.
Sure. Thank you so much for the introduction. I'm so happy to be here today with you all. I'm thrilled to be a part of this conversation as virtual interviewing is near and dear to my heart, and even more so in this crazy time that we're all living in together. I have worked all over human resources for 10 years or so, and started my career in admissions for an MBA program. So I was the director of a small sustainable MBA program based out of San Francisco for a handful of years before transitioning to the corporate side. So I was a MBA recruiter turned program manager for our internship program at T-Mobile. And now I'm lucky enough to work in MBA recruiting and program management at Amazon. So have had a variety of backgrounds sort of in the tech space and worked with students my whole career. And having these conversations is so important and such a great way to prepare ourselves as we look at interviewing in this brave new world. So thanks for having me.
Super, awesome. Thank you for joining us. It's going to be a real benefit to our Georgetown students. Let's start thinking about, before the interview, before we jump into the actual conversation, how should students prepare for interviews in general? What are your suggestions regarding company research beforehand, and then even things to have with them at the interview?
Totally. Yes. And this is one of those things that's the same whether you're sitting at your home office like we are, or if you are going to an on-site interview. I think doing your research and showing that you know what you're talking about is first and foremost. So reviewing the company website, if you have access to shareholder letters or recent news, if you're interviewing at one of these big companies, chances are there's things going on that you can read about. Whether it's recent quarterly earnings or headlines or what have you. Having an understanding of competitors and the landscape that our companies play in, reviewing products, services, if you're a customer of that certain company. Understanding all of that really gives you an edge and a way to demonstrate to an interviewer that you have done your research, but also I think will give you confidence when you're going into an interview. Saying, I know what I'm talking about. I did my research. I'm prepared, just like you would be if you studied before a test, right? I think outside of that, having your resume in hand or in this world, I'm personally living in the world where I don't have a printer. I haven't had a printer for years. So having my resume, on my screen, ready if I get any particular questions about that would be important. Having a job description, reviewing the job description before your interview. I think pen and a piece of paper goes a long way in any conversation, being able to quickly jot down notes, water, all the things you need to be successful in a conversation. And speaking of notes, I also think it's important briefly to mention keeping notes before an interview in your preparation is also important. So you in an interview most likely will be asked to tell your interviewer about a time when, or give an example of a situation where, right? And those types of things, if you have a story written down or some data points, really go a long way. Having those notes, looking down at them is okay. If you need to do it, do it. If you can have it up next on your screen, that works too. But making sure you have notes for how you might answer questions, and then also how you might ask questions. So interviews typically end with, well, I want to leave a few questions or a few minutes here at the end for you to ask questions. What questions do you have for me? This is another time where you can prove that you've done your research by asking smart questions. Don't just say, how long have you been at X company? Or what do you like about your job? Say, I read on the company website that your mission is this. As a product manager, how does that relate, or how do you play into that? or I know that your company has leadership values or principles that you follow. Do you encounter that in your work? All that good stuff. I also will say really briefly, and I know this is a long-winded answer, but it is important that you ask the questions related to what comes next in the interview process for your recruiter. Your interviewer doesn't need to hear that. They don't necessarily know exactly what the next step is or when you might hear. So save those kinds of questions for your recruiter and ask the questions about the job to your interviewer.
Excellent, excellent. Terrific. Love that. Now, that all applies really for both, in-person or virtual interviews. So are
Yeah.
there any things that might be different in the preparation for a virtual interview?
Yeah, totally. I think, all of the having a glass of water and a pen, piece of paper, and all those things are also important here at our homes. But other things to consider would be making sure that you're in a quiet and well-lit space, really minimizing disruption, excuse me, pets, roommates, kids, whatever it is that you have running around in your home. Try to shut the door if you can. That being said, we understand life is happening right now in a different way. So don't panic about having the perfect background. Don't feel like you need to have the academic bookcase and mahogany behind you or a perfectly blank wall. Be authentic, but be mindful of what it is that's behind you. Outside of that, having your device plugged in, being on good internet, taking the moments before your interview to test your microphone. If it's a specific interview software that you're being asked to use outside of Zoom, download it with a few minutes to spare before your interview. All of that stuff. And then the other thing I think along those lines that's important is making sure that you're expecting the best case scenario, expecting all of the technology is going to work perfectly, but planning for a worst case scenario. Saying like, if my internet drops, what do I do? Or if something happens, what am I going to, how will I react? It really tells a lot to an interviewer. If something happens with the interview, you drop and then you just can't get back on track. It's, oh, I'm so sorry about that. I can't believe it. Be gracious, but don't panic or dwell on any technical difficulties. Keep a phone number that you can be reached on your resume, and keep your phone on silent, but next to you, so that if it rings from a Seattle number, in my case, answer it, right? Those types of things go a really long way to show that you can roll with the punches and make it work in a virtual environment.
Yeah, Becca, those were great. Really have some contingency plans out there. Yep, expect the best, but prepare for the worst, and
Correct.
things happen.
Yeah.
So now, here's a question I get a lot. When interviewing virtually from home, how should candidates dress? Does it depend on the industry or the employer or the role? How casual is okay?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it definitely depends. I try to tell interviewers as a recruiter that they should be feeling confident when they're on the other side of the camera. And sometimes confidence means a button-down shirt, and other times confidence means whatever they're comfortable in, right? A t-shirt in my case. I work in a tech company, and I have worked in tech companies for years. So while I have a couple of suits in the back of my closet, I don't often pull them out, and I don't think I would for an interview right now. I can say, the last couple of interviews that I've had, I haven't worn a suit. But that's my industry, right? If you're interviewing in banking and you'll be expected to wear a suit when you are meeting with clients, wear a suit, right? Look the part. Dress for the job you want, I believe, is the old adage that I've heard. It really depends, but do make sure that you're feeling professional with whatever it is that's on camera. And sometimes like putting on a pair of shoes goes a long way in like your mental headspace. Whatever it is you need to do to feel comfortable.
Yeah, leave the slippers for another time, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Um, You know, I remember my interviews, and there was always, for in-person interviews, there's a process, there's a ritual leading up to the interview. You got to leave the house, you got to commute to the employer, and maybe you're flying somewhere or spending a night in a hotel, and it's
Yeah.
almost like getting up for this Super Bowl or a big game. There's all this stuff going in, and that morning you get there a little bit early, and you check into the lobby, and you're checking out the space and seeing the people come and go. So it's a real way to get you pumped up for the interview, which is a little bit anticlimactic when you're interviewing from home because you're walking
Mhm.
maybe you're in the same room that
Yeah.
you are always in. So how might students get themselves into the zone when interviewing virtually?
Yeah, this is such a good question. And I think it relates to interviewing just like it relates to maybe a Zoom happy hour that you're having with your friends, or, playing video games with friends to stay connected or whatever. We have to sort of give ourselves our own pep talks these days, especially if you're living alone or, with people who are in different environments, whether they're um, already employed or you're living with your family and they're dealing with different things. We have to hype ourselves up in some way. I think that's such a good point, Eric. I really do think that you can let your fingers do the walking by looking at pictures and videos of the corporate campus that you might be going to if you were to get the job. Um, really like watch the videos, look at the pictures, understand, like get on Google Maps and look around if you're interested in doing that. If you're not interviewing at a huge firm, look at the city. Say like, I've never been to Cincinnati, or I've never been to this country, this place. Like maybe I'll just kind of try to understand, what the environment might be like there. Um, Looking at LinkedIn profiles is also really helpful if you have names of your interviewers in advance. So say, I know I'm meeting with Eric Young today. Let me look up Eric. So just as if I were sitting in a lobby waiting for him to come by, I could stand up when I see him coming. I won't be surprised when I see him come on video in a few minutes, right? All those things. It really should get you excited doing that research, and increase your investments in the results, right? So I would love to go live in Seattle if you're interviewing for a company out here. Or I'd love to go be in New York or what have you, because you've done the research. And then the other point on that, I think, is prepping the day before or early in the morning, and then taking a walk or listening to your favorite podcast or comedian or whatever is going to get you in a good mood, just like a time to reset and commute to your interview, right? Like you're still going to want to show up 10 minutes early like you would if you were in a lobby, but the hour before should not be cram time. If you don't know what you're studying by then, you're not going to know it, right? Take a minute, reset, have a glass of water, go for a walk around the block, and be ready to interview. Show up excited.
Fantastic. Wow. You're a pro. This is fantastic. All right. Well, let's get to the interview itself now. And you used the word a little bit earlier of conversation, and I agree. I think there's so much stress that we can put on ourselves, and the expectations and the unknown of the interview and the questions, and it becomes this associated, stress ball.
Yeah.
Whereas, if we think about these as business meetings, we're having a business meeting, we're sharing information, it's an intentional conversation so that we both get to know each other better. I want to learn about your company culture, you want to learn about my skills and my values, and there's a mutually beneficial exchange going on here. So hopefully that framing is helpful. Again, to any interview in person or virtual. But obviously in the virtual world, we don't have the physicality of the conversation. We don't get the nonverbal cues. We don't know if they're like tapping their hand on
Yeah.
the table, getting nervous,
Yeah.
or whatever. So what tips do you have for candidates to come to life and let their personality come forth over the phone or through the video?
Yeah, such an important question. And to your point, rapport building is still important and maybe even more important, right? I think you made a great point in that some of those early, hey, how's your day going? Did you find parking okay? All of that, those things are a barometer of culture, right? If I don't get those, if I just get, hey, tell me about yourself, or hey, tell me about some data that you've mined, and how do you use that to make decisions or whatever, I'm going to be like, I'm a human, hello, good morning, right? So make sure that you get what you need in those early parts of a conversation with an interviewer. So if it's important to you to know if you can banter or have a quick hello with your interviewer, or a representative of the company that you're interviewing, take the time to do it. Is my advice. 9 times out of 10, interviewers are going to say, "Hi, I'm Becca. Thanks for being here today. How's your day going?" And my advice to people who need that type of engagement is to say more than fine, how are you? Say, it's a beautiful day here in Seattle today. I'm doing so well. I'm really enjoying the sun. Where are you located? Or I just finished up my favorite class with this professor who really just speaks so eloquently on leadership, and it got me really excited for our interview. I can't wait to share with you a little bit about what I've learned. Um, if you're somebody that doesn't want to do that and you want to just get down to business, say like, my day's going so well, I'm so excited for a conversation, right? Use that time to just do what you need to do. It'll be last a few minutes, and that's great. I think the other piece of that is trying to look at the camera and see what you can do to achieve eye contact. I think we're all distracted, and I can confess to this, to looking at myself occasionally, or saying like, oh, is my, like, can my dog running by or whatever. But look at the camera and pull your picture up near the camera if you can in the Zoom chat or whatever it is, to make sure that you're not tempted, and really try to build that rapport.
Excellent, great tips, great tips. We mentioned, or you mentioned a little bit earlier ago about notes and your preparation notes, and some people lay them out in front of them or underneath the laptop. They raise up the laptop and then they put them down below.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so any comments on is there a benefit for doing that? Obviously, you probably feel a little more secure as the student with the notes.
Yeah.
But does it look forced? Or obviously, you don't want to read the script from your notes.
Mm-hmm.
But what are your thoughts on the interviewer side? Can you tell that I'm reading my notes or looking at my notes?
Yeah. Uh, Sometimes, yes. You absolutely can. I think that there are questions that require notes, and having them and taking the time to write them and study them shows an interviewer that you're invested and that you want the job. So I would say referring to your notes would be dependent on the question. Like, I wouldn't recommend when someone says, "So Eric, tell me about yourself," you say, "Well, I work at Georgetown University and, yada, yada, yada." I would let those types of questions, like, let your personality and your preparation speak for itself. But if someone's asking you a behavioral interviewer question and you are going through the STAR format and you're trying to say, here's the situation, here's the result, and everything in between, you have data to share, refer to your notes. Say, let me confirm my numbers really quickly. We had a team of 6 people over 8 months, and the work that we did on this cross-functional team that I led launched efficiencies resulting in X million dollars or whatever, right? If you have the notes and you have the data, bring it. We can tell, but we like it. It's okay.
All right, good. And sometimes the employer is very focused on capturing notes on the candidate,
Mm-hmm.
maybe typing or head down writing or whatnot, and that can be either distracting or perceived as being distant from the candidate. So, any tips on how the student might respond to this, or stay focused,
Yeah.
if that happens?
Yeah, it happens. And I would say more often than not, particularly in this environment, all interviewers are expected to give interview notes after an interview, right? And so I like to tell candidates, like, interviewers taking notes during an interview is your best shot at being accurately captured, right?
Mhm.
We're not relying on an interviewer memory after they go to 5 more meetings. We're relying on what they're typing during those conversations. So I would expect it, and if you don't get it, it's a happy surprise, but plan on interviewers taking notes. My tip on that would be, don't try to fill the silence when interviewers are completing their notes, right? If they ask you a question and you have your conclusion, if you can hear the clicking or they're looking at their keyboard or at their second screen or whatever, don't do the like, so yeah, in summary, that's how I manage competing commitments, or make your point and be done with it. Wait for them to finish their notes and ask a follow-up or move on to the next question.
Yeah, that's great. Remember, as the student, give them some time to write, and don't speak too
Yeah.
fast. And let me pause for a second. Can I clarify? Can I go deeper, or is that enough?
Yep.
And so you need to maybe even over verbalize virtually because you're not there in
Yeah.
person.
Yeah, and if you're feeling, after a moment, if there's a look of confusion or something on the video, say, what other detail can I provide? Or is that sufficient? Does that answer your question? I think those questions are okay as well.
Excellent. A couple questions here with regard to different types of case interviewing. Sometimes they're full-blown business cases that are popular in consulting and strategy interviews. We're seeing some situational, what would you do in this situation, or here's the problem I'm facing today, like we call them like mini case questions,
Hmm.
to think through what are you seeing employers use, and how can students prepare for some of those.
Yeah, it does really vary. Like you said, some companies have a long history of using fairly in-depth cases. I think more common, you'll hear the high level, like, what if we were going to do this? How would you think through that? And truly, the case questions that I see most frequently in my experience at tech companies are high level, and really oriented toward understanding how you think, um, and how you talk through problems on your feet. I think depending on the level of the role and what it is specifically that you're looking at, it does give you an opportunity to demonstrate your expertise in a certain field, right? If it's a engineering related question, or you have a technical solution because you're from an engineering background, or some other real hard skill. If you have that, like, these are some of the tools that are in my tool belt that I can use them. But otherwise, really just talk about, like, okay, this is the problem. How do I really dive into the problem? How do I connect the problem to the goals of the company as I understand them per my research, right? If you're interviewing at a company that has customer obsession as a key piece, or disruption as a key piece of their mission and model, like, start with a customer or start with being disruptive. Like, go back to that thing and say, here's why this matters, and really ask a lot of questions out loud, and sort of think through it, is my example.
Yeah, that's great. Really scoping out, because you very well may get a vague
Hmm.
problem or a vague
Yeah.
question, or even a, a, a big blown out case for consulting, but they want you to scope it. And so, you got to
Right.
zoom in a little bit, or you got to clarify, what are we really solving for here? And
Yep.
that's part of solving the problem. So
Exactly.
that's all great. Um, Excellent. My students do not like being interviewed by a computer. They tell me this. And one of the interview methods that we're seeing is when it's a computerized interview, and so
Yeah.
you'll get, here's the question will appear on your screen, countdown 3, 2, 1, and you got a minute to answer it, and you get one redo. um, and so are there any ways that you would have people handle these one-way answers coming at them from an automated non-human prompt?
Yeah. Yeah, they're tough. I get it. And as a recruiter, I can say, in previous roles, I've watched a lot of those videos. And it's not more fun to watch them. I can guarantee you that. Um, but I think that some of the same rules apply as far as getting excited, and setting yourself up for success, like doing your research, taking a walk, getting a glass of water, sitting down and getting it done, right? I think that bringing energy related to that is really important. having watched a lot of them, the people who are well researched and bring a little bit of personality to their answers are the ones that stand out, right? So make sure that you're taking it seriously, but also being yourself. Just as you would try to build a rapport with an interviewer, try to have a little bit of a rapport with the computer. Like do what you need to do to make sure that you look like you're doing okay through those questions. Don't overthink it. Hit record. It's not fun for anybody, right? Is always my advice.
Yeah, that confidence is so critical,
Yeah.
especially when you're talking to a screen.
No one. Well, and
No one,
know
not even me.
that, it feels like you're talking to no one, but someone will watch them. I've been that person.
Oh,
So,
I,
it will happen. And I think that it's hard on both ends, but yeah, being confident and just showing up is really important.
oh, and they use them because it's such an efficient method. You can get one
Totally.
file and pass it out to 20 different hiring
Yep.
managers, and so it's a brilliant design. It's just a
Yeah.
painful experience.
Yeah.
All
Absolutely.
right, so we've made it through the interview, and now after the interview, at Georgetown, we stress the importance of sending thank you emails, afterwards. But it's usually easier to during the live interview, with a human being, you can get a business card, and now you got their email, and it's all good. Whereas virtually, you may not have the email, and do you stalk them on LinkedIn? Do you send something to a recruiter? How do we express thanks after the interview?
Yeah, I think that's such a important thing. I love thank you notes. I'm really glad that those happen. And it is interesting because I think even business cards aren't as much of a thing anymore, right? If we
No.
were to meet in person and do an interview, chances that I slid a business card over at the beginning of the interview are dwindling. And so figuring out ways to stay connected is really important. I think the best way to do it is via the recruiter. So I recommend saying, hi, recruiter. I really enjoyed my conversation with Eric yesterday. If possible, I'd love to get his email address from you. If not, I've attached the note below. Can you please forward it to him? Um, and make it a one and done. Like he or she, the recruiter, will either forward it to Eric, or they'll say, awesome, thank you so much for the note. Here's Eric's email. You can you send it to them on your own time, right? That would be my first line,
Yeah, great.
is via the recruiter. If it's a recruiter or if it's an interviewer that you really hit it off with and you think, man, when I grow up I want to be Eric Young, like that is my dream job, connect with them on LinkedIn. Don't do it for every person. If it's an interview that you were like, gosh, I don't know about that one, or you're not excited about it, don't connect with them on LinkedIn. But if it's somebody that you're like, I really liked this interviewer, I think they really liked me, whether I get this job or not, I want them to be a part of my network. Absolutely. And send a note, say, hey, I really enjoyed our conversation. Thank you so much for the thoughtful questions. Look forward to staying connected. Send or whatever, right?
Great. Beautiful. Great. Excellent. Thank you for that. All right. One question before we close out, and it's really with regard to another trend I guess we're seeing, and that's with various forms of assessments. Sometimes candidates, as they're applying or before they apply or as a final act before they get the offer, they've got to do maybe a writing sample or a personality or logic test, or here's some data, go answer these questions related to the
Mm-hmm.
data, or go do this project. You got 3 days to do it and send it back to me. So it's incredible what our students are being asked to do. What kind of assessments are gaining popularity, and are there ways to prepare for these?
Yeah. Um, This is true. This is a thing that I know a lot of big companies have been doing for a long time. But I can say in this world we're living in today, smaller organizations are looking at this as a way to understand skill level and talent in a different light. I think the first thing I'll say is generally these online assessments aren't quizzes on the company, right? So if you're interviewing for a particular organization, studying for an online assessment does not mean memorizing the mission statement or understanding the financials for the company if you're looking at a finance job. they're generally about your skill, experience, and fit. So similar to case questions, they're designed for us to understand how you think and where you might excel in our company, right? So they're really about seeing your work in action. I think there's a lot to be said for understanding how prior success impacts future success. So I can do these things, therefore I can continue to do these things, or I can continue to develop and grow these skills. So that's what those assessments are really measuring. I think that the best way that you can prepare for them is utilizing your career coaches at your school. As recruiters, we try to lift the veil as much as we can to make people feel set up for success as they go into those assessments. And your career coach can, one, probably walk you through the assessment, and two, connect you with people who have successfully completed the assessment in recent years. Generally, the content might change a little, but the structure is generally the same year over year. So you can really understand what to expect that way. Because we're talking about the virtual thing, I also think it's important to say, like, have the most up-to-date browser. Sit down to complete your assessment in one setting, not on your phone, right? Like, be at your laptop. And then if you're given like 3 days to complete an assessment, as you mentioned, don't wait until the third day at the 12th hour, right? Give yourself a little bit of wiggle room so that if you do need an extension, I know the organizations that I've worked for have all been willing to provide them, right? Like, or if you have some technical issue, like, let us help you be successful by setting yourself up for success.
Two quick responses. One, don't wait to the last second to start or submit your
Yeah,
assessment. Um, and when you apply to something, don't wait to the 11th hour before you have to apply either.
please, yes.
Systems crash.
Yeah.
Um, and many companies have, a national deadline or a global deadline,
Hmm.
and there could be thousands of people all waiting at that last minute. So I say get it in a day early. So
Totally, totally. I completely agree. Yeah.
and then, a lot of these assessments, there's no trick to it, and there's really, in some cases, no preparation to it.
Hmm.
I'm not going to go learn new vocabulary words because it's not a vocabulary test.
Correct.
And it's like, what would your natural instinct do? So in many cases, just relax. Try not to find what you think they want you to say or do, but what would you do? And it's
Yep.
authentic. And one reaction for one kind of role could be the right answer, and it could be a very wrong reaction for a different kind of role.
Hmm.
So again, I try to also share just, what would you do? Stop
Yeah.
trying to overthink it. Just,
Yeah.
the fire
Right.
alarm's going off. What do you do? I'm going
Yeah.
to leave the building.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And they really, these assessments are meant to be like, if you had this job, here's what you could expect, and here's, like, you're telling us what you would do in those environments. So yeah, honesty is the best policy. Don't overthink it. Yeah, I
Great.
completely
I'm with
agree.
you. All right. Well, as we wrap up here, I'd love to hear any closing thoughts you have, or tips or advice or wisdom, guidance, encouragement for our Georgetown Hoyas.
Yes. Yeah, two thoughts. I think first, let's all give ourselves grace, right? We're all living in this new environment. I think the word unprecedented is thrown around a lot, but truly it's hard to imagine a better use for the word unprecedented. These are unprecedented times. And I don't think anyone's perfected it quite yet, right? We're all figuring out how we are going to operate, how we're going to interview you, how you are going to show up in your best self to be interviewed. So be patient, give yourself some grace, give your future employer the benefit of the doubt, and come to this with the best attitude that you can. I really think that we can feel that via video and conversation um, over the phone. So that would be the first thing. Secondly, whether you're interviewing in person or over the phone or video or completing an online assessment, it's truly important that you're yourself. They say if you show up as a different person for your interview, you're going to have to show up as that person every day in that career, right? Be yourself, and really don't sell yourself short on the skills that you have and the experience that you bring. You really want to bring authentically you to your interview so that you can really be successful and enjoy your career. And that's even more important in a virtual environment.
Right, we could get into a longer coaching, advising conversation about fit,
Hmm.
and everyone wants to work at the dream companies, but not every dream company is a good fit for who you are. And
Yeah,
so that's where I think, again, be authentic. Don't try to overthink or outthink or sneak in the back door. It could be the
yeah,
wrong door. There could be
totally.
a perfect door waiting for you somewhere else. So
Yep, yep. And ask the questions to make sure the door's the right fit for you, right? I really think that we show up as ourselves authentically as candidates, just as we're asking interviewers to be authentic in their experience. So the more transparency that we can provide to each other, the better.
brilliant. Well, we'll end on that note. Becca and I have worked together at two of her employer relationships that have both worked with Georgetown. And this has just been a special treat for us to get to connect in a fun way and to hopefully help our students. So thank you for your wisdom, your insights, your energy. All the best with your continued work. And thank you immensely.
Likewise, thank you.
Thank you. And to our Georgetown Hoyas, I hope this was beneficial, and we'll see you soon. Take care.